Some stories don't begin with violence. They begin with silence, heavy, suffocating silence that waits just before the world shatters. For Malcolm Hill, that silence was the sound of his knuckles brushing gently against a stranger's door. To anyone else, it was nothing more than a knock. But for him, it was a moment he'd replay in his mind over and over, wondering how something so ordinary could have led to everything that came after. Malcolm wasn't a man chasing danger. He wasn't reckless, or confrontational, or looking for a fight. He was just trying to make a living in the Florida heat, walking from one porch to the next with a clipboard in hand and hope in his chest. Selling solar panels wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and he carried it with quiet pride. He believed in saving people money, in helping families cut bills, in being the kind of man his late father would respect. But on that July afternoon, honesty and hope meant nothing. Because when the door opened, so did the abyss. The man who stepped into view didn't see Malcolm as a salesman. He didn't see the sweat on his brow, the weariness in his eyes, or the humanity in his voice. He saw only skin. And behind that man, a woman hovered like a shadow, her lips pursed with suspicion. Their home wasn't a home, it was a fortress, and Malcolm was the intruder they never wanted to face. He tried anyway. He always tried. "Good afternoon, sir, I just wanted to share." "Get your black ass off my porch." The words landed like stones. Heavy, sharp, designed to bruise. Malcolm's chest tightened, but he held his ground. His instinct wasn't to fight, but to survive. He reached for his phone, lifting it as quietly as possible. If they were going to dehumanize him, he would make sure the world saw it too. And the world did see. Every second, every slur, every threat spat like venom. "Come back again, and I'm gonna hang your black ass." The recording captured it all. The hate-soaked fury, the woman's echoing silence, the trembling in Malcolm's voice as he tried to leave with dignity. By nightfall, the video would ignite TikTok like gasoline to fire. 400,000 views in hours, tens of thousands of strangers recoiling at the ugliness of what they'd witnessed. But the flames didn't stop there. The couple behind the tirade found their lives ripped open, their names dragged through the raw current of the internet. Dozens of strangers began digging, posting, exposing. Soon, their home wasn't just a house, it was a target. A package arrived days later, its contents so suspicious that hazmat crews were called to the quiet street. Fear turned inward. Hate came full circle. And Malcolm? He became more than a salesman. He became a symbol, unwillingly pulled into a storm he never asked for. This isn't the story of a business pitch gone wrong. It's the story of a man who knocked on a door and uncovered the kind of hate that thrives in the dark until someone dares to drag it into the light. Before we dive deeper, a quick word to both my returning family and those who've just found this channel. Welcome. Here, we unravel the darkest, most haunting true crime stories told in ways you've never heard before. If you haven't already, take a second to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and most importantly, stay with me till the very end. Because in this story, every moment matters, and each detail brings us closer to the chilling truth. The knock was simple. The silence before it was ordinary. But everything that followed changed lives. And it began with Malcolm Hill. Now, let's return to that day and see how it all started. Before the world saw him through a shaky phone recording, before hashtags and headlines carved his name into the internet's memory, Malcolm Hill was just a man with a dream, modest, unremarkable to some, but precious to him. He was 32 years old, lean from long hours on his feet, with shoulders that had grown used to the weight of rejection. His mother often said he had his father's eyes, steady, patient, but with a flicker of quiet fire when pushed too far. That fire, though, had been buried under years of learning how to survive in spaces that didn't always welcome him. Malcolm grew up in Pine Hills, a working-class neighborhood just west of Orlando. His father, Samuel Hill, was a mechanic known for working late into the night, his hands blackened with oil and grit. His mother, Denise, taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. Together, they carved out a life that wasn't easy, but it was honest. It was Samuel who taught Malcolm that a man's word was his most valuable currency. "If you can't promise, don't offer," his father would say, wiping sweat from his brow in the dim light of their garage. Malcolm carried that lesson into everything. His friendships, his work, even his small daily interactions with strangers. But Samuel never made it past 50. A sudden heart attack stole him in the middle of a workday. Malcolm, then only 20, had to step into the role of man of the house, helping his mother with bills while trying to finish community college. He never forgot the night of the funeral, when neighbors filled their cramped living room, casseroles stacked on the table, and he swore silently to himself that he would never let his mother down. That promise led him down winding paths, jobs in retail, construction, call centers. None of them stuck, but each left its mark: the art of persuasion, the resilience to keep standing after a door slammed in his face, the discipline to keep smiling even when exhaustion chewed at his bones. Selling solar panels wasn't a career he had planned for, but it felt, in some strange way, like a culmination of all those pieces. It demanded patience, charm, and grit. Most importantly, it offered him a chance to finally get ahead, to save for the house he dreamed of buying one day. Still, the work was brutal. Florida summers did not forgive. By noon, his shirt clung to his back, his throat begged for water, and his feet ached from pounding pavement. But Malcolm carried on, driven by the image of his mother resting easier, of debts finally fading, of a life where he could breathe without constantly calculating every dollar. Behind his professional smile was a private ache. Malcolm was engaged once, years ago, to a woman named Tasha. She loved his ambition but not his uncertainty, and after too many nights of financial strain and postponed plans, the engagement collapsed. It left Malcolm wary of promises, though he still believed in love. He found solace in small things: Sunday dinners with his mother, the hum of old R&B records on his turntable, and the simple satisfaction of seeing a stranger's face soften when they realized he wasn't trying to scam them. He wanted to be seen, not as a salesman, not as a stereotype, but as Malcolm, a man with dignity, humor, and hope. But dignity doesn't shield a man from prejudice. From the start of his career, Malcolm noticed the shift in certain doorways. Some people listened politely before shaking their heads. Others shut the door without a word. And then there were the few whose eyes narrowed, whose posture stiffened, whose faces twisted with a distrust that had nothing to do with solar panels. He felt it in his bones, the unspoken suspicion that came not from his pitch, but from his skin. One evening, after another long day, he sat at his mother's kitchen table, her laughter trying to lift his spirits. She noticed the heaviness in his shoulders. "Rough day?" she asked gently. "Yeah," Malcolm admitted, staring into his glass of iced tea. "It's like, some people don't even hear me. They just see me. And not in the way I want to be seen." His mother's eyes softened. "Baby, you carry yourself with pride. Don't let anyone take that from you. Their hate is their prison, not yours." He nodded, but deep down he knew it wasn't that simple. Hate had a way of spilling over its walls, staining anyone who came too close. On that sweltering July afternoon, as Malcolm wiped sweat from his forehead and approached yet another house on a quiet suburban street in Orange County, he wasn't thinking about prejudice or threats. He was thinking about numbers, how many doors he'd knocked on, how close he was to hitting his weekly goal, whether today might finally bring a breakthrough. The house didn't stand out at first glance. A neat lawn, trimmed hedges, curtains pulled tight against the glare of the sun. There was no sign that behind that door lay anything other than another polite rejection or, at worst, an indifferent shrug. But Malcolm had learned to read silences. And this silence was different. The stillness seemed to stretch across the porch like a warning. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. He hesitated, then raised his hand and knocked. In the seconds that followed, he felt the weight of his father's lessons, his mother's prayers, and his own weary hope pressing down on him. He told himself it was just another door, just another chance. But as the knob turned and the door creaked open, something in his gut twisted, an instinct older than reason, a whisper telling him this was no ordinary encounter. He forced a smile anyway. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Malcolm Hill, and I was wondering if you've ever considered." The man cut him off with a glare that burned hotter than the July sun. His lips curled, his posture rigid, and behind him, a shadow moved, the woman, silent but sharp-eyed, watching. Malcolm's voice faltered, the smile still plastered on his face out of habit, out of survival. He didn't yet know that this moment, this porch, this door, this stranger's gaze, would change the course of his life. All he knew was that something dark had just stepped into the light. The man's eyes told Malcolm everything before his mouth ever moved. Cold, narrowed, suspicious. They scanned him up and down as though he were not a human being standing on the porch, but a trespasser, a threat, an intruder who had no right to exist in this space. Malcolm tried again, his voice steady but softer this time, as though reason might melt the ice in the man's glare. "Sir, I just wanted to let you know about a program that could lower your—" The words stopped dead in his throat. "Take your black ass off my porch." The sentence cut through the air with the sharpness of a blade. The man didn't shout it. He spat it, deliberate and venomous, each word meant to slice, to strip away Malcolm's dignity. Behind him, the woman shifted. She hadn't spoken yet, but her silence was its own form of complicity. Her lips pressed tighter, her arms folded as though Malcolm's very presence was contamination leaking into their home. For a moment, the Florida heat seemed to thicken into something unbearable. Malcolm's hand twitched around the strap of his tablet bag. Every instinct in him screamed to step back, to walk away, to leave this poisoned threshold. But another instinct, one that had been honed by too many years of swallowing injustice, told him that if he left silently, his story would vanish like smoke. He raised his phone. Not obviously, not in defiance, but subtly, slipping it out of his pocket and tapping the record button. If these people wanted to bear their hate, then the world would see it. The man noticed. His face twisted into something even uglier. "You recording me?" His voice cracked with rage. "You think you're smart? You think you can just come around here with your scams and your lies?" "I'm just doing my job, sir," Malcolm said evenly, though his chest was tight, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm not here to bother you. I just wanted to share some information." "Information?" The man laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. "I got some information for you. We don't want your kind here. We don't want you on our street, we don't want you at our door, and we sure as hell don't want you standing there looking at me like you belong." His voice grew louder, filling the small porch until it felt like the walls themselves recoiled. The woman behind him finally spoke, her tone sharp, slicing through the air like glass. "Just get out of here before you regret it." Malcolm's throat tightened. He had been here before, not this exact place, not this exact porch, but this feeling. The feeling of being told without words that his existence was an intrusion. But rarely had it been so raw, so naked. He steadied himself, forcing air into his lungs, his phone still angled toward the man. "Sir, I'm leaving now." "No need for." That's when it came. The line that would forever mark this day. "Come back again, and I'm gonna hang your black ass." The words slammed into Malcolm like a physical blow. For a split second, the world slowed, his mind struggling to comprehend that someone could spit such violence so casually, standing on a porch in broad daylight. The man's face contorted, his veins bulging, his fists clenched at his sides. It wasn't a drunken outburst, it wasn't careless. It was intentional. A threat not just of harm, but of history. A chilling invocation of the noose, of the trees that bore witness to centuries of racial terror. Malcolm's hand trembled, but the phone stayed steady. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Get this. Every second. Don't let them bury this." He forced his voice calm, though it shook at the edges. "Sir, I don't want any trouble. I'm leaving." The man stepped forward, just enough for Malcolm to feel the porch grow smaller. His shadow stretched across the boards, swallowing the sunlight between them. "You better run. And don't you ever come back." The woman's silence was no longer quiet. It was a weight, an agreement hanging in the air. She didn't flinch, didn't recoil, didn't stop him. Her eyes followed Malcolm like cold steel. Every muscle in Malcolm's body wanted to bolt down the steps, but he forced himself to turn slowly, deliberately, his pride refusing to let them see him break. His phone was still recording, tucked low, capturing every syllable of hate, every tremor in his voice, every ounce of poison they unleashed. As he stepped off the porch, the man shouted after him, louder, uglier, as though the retreat gave him permission to unleash the full torrent. Get out of here, boy. You think anyone's gonna believe you? You think you're special? You're nothing. Nothing. Malcolm walked faster, his breath ragged, sweat stinging his eyes. Each step away from the house felt like a battle, his dignity clinging by a thread. He wanted to scream, to shout back, to let them know he was more than their hate. But he stayed silent, gripping the phone like a lifeline. When he finally reached the sidewalk, his legs trembled beneath him. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see the man still standing in the doorway, chest heaving, veins bulging, his voice a storm of slurs that blurred into the Florida air. Malcolm kept walking. Past the driveway. Past the mailbox. Past the pristine lawns of neighbors who had peeked through their blinds but done nothing. He kept walking until the house was out of sight, until the words faded into memory, until only the pounding of his heart remained. Only then did he stop. His hand shook as he lifted the phone to his face. The recording was still running, the red dot glowing. He pressed stop, staring at the thumbnail image, frozen proof of what had just happened. The enormity of it hit him all at once. His legs gave out, and he sank onto the curb, his breath ragged, his chest burning with fury, humiliation, and a strange, hollow ache. He had been called names before. He had faced suspicion before. But this was different. This was not ignorance, not subtle bias, not a passing insult. This was a direct threat, laced with the echoes of history, shouted without fear or shame. And now he held it in his hands. Malcolm sat there for a long time, the sun beating down on his shoulders, cars humming past in the distance. His mind raced. Should he post it? Should he call someone? Should he just delete it and move on, let it be another scar tucked away where no one else could see? But the words echoed too loudly to ignore. Come back again, and I'm gonna hang your black ass. He thought of his father, of the lessons about dignity and honesty. He thought of his mother, urging him never to let others strip away his worth. And he thought of every moment in his life where he had swallowed the bitterness of prejudice, telling himself it was better to stay quiet. Not this time. Malcolm stood, his grip firm around the phone. He walked back to his car, climbed inside, and closed the door. The silence inside the vehicle was suffocating, but it also felt like the beginning of something. He opened TikTok. His thumb hovered over the upload button. He hesitated just for a second, because once he pressed it, the world would know. And nothing would ever be the same. He pressed it. The video began to upload. The red bar crawled across the screen. And with each percentage, Malcolm's life moved further away from ordinary and deeper into the storm. The upload took less than a minute, but the ripples began instantly. At first, Malcolm thought it would vanish into the endless scroll of TikTok, just another clip drowned out by dances, recipes, and comedy skits. He closed the app, started his car, and sat there staring at the wheel. His chest was tight, his mind racing. He had done it. He had thrown his story into the digital current. And then the notifications began. At first, one or two, small comments trickling in. This is disgusting. Are you okay, brother? But within an hour, the numbers multiplied. Views surged past 10,000. By nightfall, the count leapt past 100,000. The phone vibrated in his pocket relentlessly, buzzing with every share, every duet, every outraged voice amplifying his own. The comments cut deep and healed at the same time. This broke me. We still live in this kind of America? Stay strong, King. You did the right thing. Find them. Expose them. People like this don't deserve to hide. Malcolm sat in his small apartment that night, the glow of his phone screen painting his face in pale light. He refreshed the app over and over, each update showing the wildfire spreading. 400,000 views. 40,000 comments. His name, his story, was everywhere. But with the support came the darker undercurrent. Some comments dripped with skepticism. We didn't see the whole interaction. Maybe he provoked them. This looked staged. Others were more direct, anonymous accounts hurling the same slurs he thought he'd escaped when he walked off that porch. Hate had followed him online, cloaked in fake names and profile pictures. Still, the tide of outrage was undeniable. Strangers rallied to his side, demanding accountability. Hashtags bloomed. Hashtag racist raid, hashtag doorstep hate, hashtag justice for Malcolm. People began digging, frame by frame, into the video. Eagle-eyed viewers caught the street number blurred in the corner, the curve of the driveway, the faint reflection of the couple in the glass door. It didn't take long. Within 24 hours, the internet had a name. And once names surfaced, addresses followed. The couple's faces, twisted in anger on Malcolm's recording, were plastered across Twitter threads and Reddit boards. Their identities were no longer private. Some users claimed to find their Facebook pages, their employer's website, even their relatives' phone numbers. Screenshots flew like arrows, each one more damning than the last. Malcolm watched with a mix of vindication and dread. He had wanted the truth out. He had wanted the world to see. But now the world wasn't just watching, it was hunting. By the second night, news outlets picked up the story. Local reporters replayed his video on the evening news, their voices solemn, their words sharp, racial slurs and threats caught on camera in an Orange County neighborhood. The segment ended with anchors condemning the behavior, promising updates as investigations unfolded. National blogs followed, then cable shows. TikTok wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was evidence. And Malcolm found himself at the center of something far bigger than himself. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, inside that same house with the drawn curtains, the couple's world was collapsing. The husband, red-eyed and furious, threw his phone against the wall after scrolling through endless comments calling him a monster, a bigot, a threat. "They don't know me," he shouted, pacing the living room. His wife sat rigid on the couch, scrolling through messages of her own. Anonymous accounts filled her inbox with curses, threats, even pictures of nooses sent back to her. By the third day, their address was everywhere. Strangers drove past their house, slowing down to stare. Someone left a sign in their yard reading, "Racist scum live here." The neighbors, once polite if distant, now avoided them entirely. And then the package came. A plain cardboard box, no return address, left at their doorstep. The husband brought it inside without thinking, until his wife pointed out the odd weight, the strange rattle when it moved. Panic set in. They dialed 911. Within an hour, police cars lined the street, yellow tape fluttered in the humid air, and a hazmat team in protective suits carried the package out like it was a bomb. The irony was brutal. The same doorstep where hate had spilled now became a stage for fear. The couple peeked from their windows, their faces pale, realizing they were no longer feared, they were hunted. Malcolm saw the news report about the hazmat response and felt a knot twist in his chest. He hadn't wanted violence. He hadn't wanted revenge. He just wanted to be heard. Yet the storm he unleashed was now bigger than his control. His phone buzzed again. A reporter requesting an interview. Another offering payment for rights to the video. A lawyer reaching out, saying there might be grounds for charges. And amid it all, his mother's voice on the line, soft but firm. "Baby, you need to be careful. People are watching you now. Not just your friends. Not just your community. Everyone." Malcolm closed his eyes. He thought of his father's lessons of dignity and honesty. He thought of how the man's words still rang in his ears, raw and jagged. He thought of the millions of strangers now holding pieces of his story in their hands, judging, reacting, dividing. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just his story anymore. It was everyone's. The porch had been the beginning. The video was the spark. But what came next would decide whether the fire brought light or left nothing but ash. And Malcolm knew one thing: the world was watching. By the fourth day, the video was no longer just a video. It was a movement, a rallying cry, a mirror held up to America's ugliest truths. In Orlando, protests sprouted overnight. A small group first gathered outside the couple's house, holding cardboard signs scrawled with, "We see you," and "Hate has no home here." By the weekend, the crowd swelled into dozens, then hundreds, chanting Malcolm's name alongside cries for justice. The street where his dignity had been shredded was now lined with people demanding change. The couple never stepped outside. Their blinds stayed drawn, their lawn abandoned. Police patrolled the block to keep order, but even their presence couldn't mute the chants, the megaphones, the steady drumbeat of voices rising against hate. Inside his apartment, Malcolm watched it all unfold on live streams. He saw strangers marching in the sun, waving signs with his name painted in bold letters. He saw TikTok duets where activists dissected the video frame by frame, using it as proof that racism was not just history, but present, breathing, raw. Part of him swelled with pride. Another part shrank with fear. He hadn't asked for this. He had wanted truth, he had wanted the world to know what had been said to him. But he hadn't imagined becoming the face of a movement. His inbox overflowed with messages from people sharing their own stories of being degraded at work, profiled in stores, pulled over for no reason. One message in particular stayed with him. "Brother, my dad was lynched in Mississippi in the 60s. Hearing that man threaten you like that brought it all back. Thank you for not staying silent." Malcolm read it 3 times, tears burning his eyes. But then there were the other messages. Dark ones. "You'll regret posting this. You ruined innocent people's lives." Some were worse, explicit threats filled with promises of violence. Anonymous accounts, faceless avatars, but Malcolm felt their venom all the same. One night as he carried groceries to his apartment door, he noticed a slip of paper wedged into the frame. His chest tightened as he unfolded it. Scrawled in thick black marker were 4 words. "You're next, boy." His hand shook. He darted his eyes around the dimly lit hallway, but it was empty. Just the hum of a flickering light bulb overhead, the quiet echo of his own breathing. He shoved the note into his pocket, his heart pounding. That night, sleep refused him. He lay awake in the dark, replaying the porch encounter in his mind, the man's snarling face, the threat hanging in the air like a noose. And now, the echo of anonymous hate pressed against his door. The community, however, was louder than his fear. Church leaders reached out, offering support. Local organizations invited him to speak at rallies. His mother begged him to decline, afraid of putting him further in the spotlight. But Malcolm felt something stirring inside him, something that wouldn't let him stay silent anymore. On the 5th day, he stood before a crowd for the first time. The sun was merciless, sweat beading on his brow, but the sea of faces lifted him. Cameras pointed, microphones thrust forward, but he spoke from a place deeper than performance. "I knocked on a door to do my job," he began, his voice carrying over the crowd. "I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for attention. But what I found that day is something too many of us already know. Hate doesn't hide in shadows anymore. It lives in plain sight. It answers the door, it threatens lives, and it dares to think it can silence us." The crowd roared. Signs waved higher. A woman in the front row cried openly. Malcolm's chest trembled with emotion, but his words kept flowing. "I will not be silent, and I will not let that threat define me. My father taught me to walk with dignity. My mother taught me to speak truth. And today I stand here to tell you, hate knocked me down, but it did not break me." Cheers thundered back, echoing through the streets. But as the applause rang in his ears, Malcolm caught sight of something at the edge of the crowd. A man standing stiffly, arms folded, eyes fixed on him with a gaze that felt too familiar. Narrowed, cold. The kind of look that pierced through joy and dragged you back into fear. He blinked, and the man was gone, swallowed by the mass of people. But the image clung to him like smoke. That night, back in his apartment, Malcolm's phone buzzed again. A new voicemail, this one from an unknown number. He hesitated before pressing play. Static crackled. Then a voice, low and rasping. "You think you're safe now? You think people can protect you? Watch your back, Malcolm. Watch your back." The line went dead. His stomach lurched. He dropped the phone onto the couch, pressing his palms into his eyes. The walls of his apartment seemed to close in. The cheers of the rally still echoed in his memory, but so did the man's threat, the folded note, the voice in the dark. This was no longer just a viral story. It was a war, fought in daylight with protests and hashtags, and in shadows with whispers and warnings. Malcolm understood something then. Exposing hate didn't end it. It only dragged it into the open, where it lashed out harder, uglier, more desperate. And he was caught in the center, a symbol and a target, lifted by strangers but hunted by unseen enemies. The question that haunted him now wasn't whether the world was watching. It was whether the world could protect him. And in the quiet of his apartment, with threats creeping closer and fear clawing at his chest, Malcolm realized the storm he unleashed was far from over. The days stretched into weeks, and what began as a shaky phone recording became something larger than Malcolm could have ever imagined. News anchors still replayed the clip, analysts dissected it, pastors preached about it, and hashtags kept climbing across every platform. But the storm wasn't just online anymore. It had entered courtrooms, boardrooms, and neighborhoods across Florida. The sheriff's office announced an official investigation into the threats Malcolm endured. The video, they said, was clear enough to warrant criminal review. For once, the system seemed to be listening. Malcolm sat in the front row of the press conference, his hands folded tightly, his jaw set. The words, "hate crime charges under consideration," rolled off the sheriff's lips like a weight Malcolm had carried all his life was finally being named for what it was. The couple who had once stood so confidently on their porch now shrank under the glare of the public eye. Their employers issued statements of condemnation. Their names became synonymous with shame. The man was eventually arrested, booked on charges of making terroristic threats and intimidation. Images of him in handcuffs flashed across TV screens, a reversal of power so many had longed to see. For once, it was not the black man being dragged away, but the one who had threatened to drag him from this world. Malcolm's mother wept when she saw the footage. "Justice, baby," she whispered over the phone. "It may not heal everything, but it's a start." But even as justice crept forward, Malcolm knew this wasn't just about one man's arrest. The messages kept coming. People from across the country, some black, some white, some who had never spoken publicly about race before, poured their stories into his inbox. Stories of humiliation at store counters, of threats whispered in neighborhoods, of fear during traffic stops. Every message reminded him that what happened on that porch wasn't an isolated storm. It was a symptom of a larger, relentless weather system that stretched across generations. One evening, Malcolm returned to the same street where it all began. The protests had ended, the crowds had gone, the couple's house stood in silence, blinds drawn as always. The grass had grown patchy, weeds poking through. The air was heavy, but the atmosphere had changed. He stood across the street, staring at the porch. The same boards where he had stood sweating in the July sun, the same threshold where his dignity had been assaulted, the same door that had unleashed words meant to destroy him. Now it was quiet. For the first time since that day, Malcolm felt taller standing there. He didn't need to knock again. He didn't need to hear their voices. The world had already heard enough. As he turned to leave, a neighbor, an older woman with kind eyes, stepped outside her home. She walked slowly, her hands clasped, and stopped a few feet away. "I saw what happened that day," she admitted softly. "I should have said something sooner. I didn't. But I want you to know, I'm sorry. And thank you for showing the world." Malcolm met her gaze. For the first time in weeks, a small, genuine smile broke across his face. "It wasn't just me," he said quietly. "It was everyone who refused to look away." That night, back in his apartment, Malcolm sat by his window as the cicadas hummed in the humid air. He thought about his father's words, about dignity and honesty. He thought about his mother's prayers. He thought about how a simple knock on a door had led him here, to a place where his life intersected with a much bigger story. Hate had tried to silence him. Instead, it had been exposed. Justice had spoken, however imperfectly. And now, the burden he carried was not just survival, but responsibility, to keep telling the truth, to keep shining a light where darkness still lingered. He leaned back, closing his eyes, and whispered into the quiet, "This isn't just my story. It's all of ours." Because the reality was clear. What happened on that porch was not an isolated eruption of hate. It was part of a system that had stretched its roots deep into the soil of America, one that would only change if voices kept rising, if stories kept being told, if silence was no longer an option. Malcolm understood now that he was more than a victim, more than a salesman, more than a viral video. He was a witness. And with that role came power. The power to remind the world that racism doesn't vanish in the light of day unless someone dares to hold it there. And so, as he shut off his lamp and let the night settle around him, he made peace with one truth. The knock that nearly broke him had, in its own way, rebuilt him too. Before we close, I want to take a moment to thank each of you, those who've been with this channel from the start and those just finding us now. Stories like Malcolm's aren't easy to hear, but they're necessary. They remind us that silence protects no one, and that speaking out, even when it's terrifying, can change everything. If this story stirred something in you, I invite you to stand with us. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share your voice in the comments. Your engagement isn't just numbers on a screen, it's part of a larger community that refuses to let stories like